Welcome back, America. You know that music means Jim Geraghty, Washington Post columnist, National Review contributor, usually on the editors, but not on the editors yesterday. So, Jim, I don't know what you were doing yesterday, but they needed you on the editors yesterday. They brought in Jack Butler from the bullpen, who is Hugh Hewitt trained, and we love Jack, but I would have liked to have heard your opinion on these things. But I'm going to go immediately to the worst topic possible, the school shootings in Minneapolis. And I want to preface this by telling you, I spent the whole first segment talking about this and my commentary on it last night on the Hannity Show. Jason Chaffetz sitting in with Guy Benson, Mary Catherine, and I. And my comment was it's very easy to say something you regret when you talk about school shootings. It's very hard to say anything that brings anyone any solace or comfort. But I do need your reaction to this. Minneapolis Senator Tina Smith, or Minnesota Senator Tina Smith posts a quote, do not offer thoughts and prayers as you
You,
systematically enable such tragedies. Do not claim prayers are sufficient when children die as they pray. Please do not pretend you understand. Lydia, 19. No comments from Senator Smith, but she posted it. What do you think about that?
so your listeners know that I am 99 times out of 100 opposed to gun control proposals. I think they're really ineffective response to what is ultimately a mental health and just flat out problem of evil. But if let's say you're a strong gun control supporter, you don't have to denigrate prayer. You don't have to denigrate turning to religious faith and your religious community and God at a time when you've seen the most horrific thing imaginable, right? If you want to say, prayers aren't enough, fine. And some people have been wise enough to put it that way, but I think some people, including Jen Psaki and a couple others, have crossed over into it with the kind of this sneering, mocking tone of this. And it's never a good idea to mock prayer. It's a particularly bad idea after an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old have been murdered while they were praying in a church. Um, I completely get what you said, Hugh, about not wanting, like, this broke while Greg and I were taping a show. We were actually interviewing Curtis Sliwa, the mayoral candidate in New York City, the Republican, the only decent option in the entire state. And they are, and it was the only entire decent option in that race. And news breaks, and we just mentioned it very quickly and say, we're really sorry to hear about what's happening out of Minnesota. Details are still coming in. I like to wait, if possible, 24 hours before something like this, because a lot of rumors and stuff is floating around and all that kind of stuff. I've noticed I feel like there are certain people when a mass shooting occurs, they feel a need to jump in. They feel a need to react as quickly as possible and say, "This is Republicans' fault. This is Christians' fault. This is gun owners' fault. This is your fault, my political opponents." And I don't think that one doesn't help anybody. I don't think it makes anything any better. Two, it's I think a smear. It's false. And yet, I think there is this eagerness to set the narrative. There is this eagerness to insist this is why we need the gun show loophole, even if the shooter didn't get their guns from a gun show. It's just almost this very familiar script. And I feel like the inherent instinct of decency to want to wait before you come out and say something is somehow works against us. Because if you actually
Well,
do
let
take the
me
time
add
to
to
wait,
that.
well, yeah, sure.
Do you think that that is combined with the progressive left's slow descent from secular absolutism, meaning that there not be faith in the public square, which has been crushed by the Supreme Court, into an active anti religious attitude that is redolent of Marxist, Leninist, anti religion? I mean, that's part of the ideology of the hardest of the left. Do you think that is creeping in and taking over America's left?
In some corners, indisputably, Hugh. Although I'd say it's odd. Do you ever hear him complaining about Muslims? No, no,
Of
no,
course
no
not.
protests
No,
outside mosques. No,
no.
funny. That's the one religion they never seem to get all that upset about. Going back to Hugh, you and I have been doing this for a long time. Remember the Mohammed cartoons? Remember,
Oh, yes. Charlie
right?
Hebdo.
Right?
Charlie Hebdo. Yep.
But yeah, so like, well, this way, it's a free country, and we have had people who have not been believers in this country since, as long as we've had Americans, and the Constitution protects your right to not be a believer, be a non-believer. However, freedom of religion does not necessarily mean freedom from religion, and your right to not practice religion cannot interfere with somebody else's practice of their religion. Time, place, your law. You know the law very well. You think you get the general gist.
So that leads me to the
Um,
next question. Before the tragedy in Minneapolis, there was comedy. There was the National Democratic Committee met. They began with a land acknowledgement, which is something of a secular religion, and then it
mm.
descended into chaos. They couldn't pass anything, and they were left-wing driven. Is it collapsing? Are they going the way of the Whigs, Jim Geraghty?
It'll be a long, long time before the Democratic Party, collapses or disappears. It probably is going to morph. It's probably going to transform. It's probably going to change. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are much further to the left than, say, Joe Biden, who, if presuming Mamdani wins, that they're going to say, what worked in New York City is going to work all across the country. Let's run socialism and communism in a Senate race in North Carolina or in Iowa, since apparently Joni Ernst is going to retire. Let's run in that congressional seat in Omaha, Nebraska. This is going to, my guess is that will not work very well at all. Having said that, you look at the polling numbers amongst Generation Z and young people, they aren't as reflexively opposed to socialism. They aren't as reflexively opposed to communism. They have no memory of the Cold War. This is something that's ancient history for them. And so, like this poster behind me, "Bedtime for Brezhnev," right? This is to them what World War II was. Being a Generation X like me, it was something that happened before their time, and so they can't grasp the degree to which, like, their idea of socialism is maybe, if they're on the really good, they'll say Norway, which, oh, by the way, has a whole lot of oil and gas revenue to finance all of their social spending. Right? They have this idea like, it's going to be nice, kind, gentle stuff, even though every time you start doing anything resembling communism, owning the means of production, as Mamdani said, it always ends up with gulags. It always ends up with disaster and a search for scapegoats and, liquidating the kulaks and things like that.
What 1 minute, Jim? Mamdani wants to get rid of misdemeanors. Do you think he's ignorant or that ideologically committed to chaos?
One of my things about Mamdani is that he is, not just a socialist, an out-and-out communist who also supports globalizing the Intifada. Like it's all bad news with him all the way down. But I think people who are in the New York City area really are terrified of what his view is going to be on crime, because in addition to being soft on crime, there's a strong suspicion that Mamdani will have zero interest in enforcing the law against violence that comes from a left-wing direction. So if you're, say, the Israeli consulate, let's say if you're a pro-Israeli business, let's say if you're any big business, a big chunk of the young, angry left was cheering the assassination of a health insurance company executive. Now, imagine, when that attitude spreads through New York City, how hard will the Mamdani administration crack down on left-wing violence, protests that turn into riots, things like that? He's basically openly announcing that, when he gets in there, law enforcement's going to get even more politicized.
I don't know if it's Curtis or if it's going to be Eric Adams. One of those two has to drop out, because if they're both in, it's going to be Mayor Mamdani. Jim Geraghty, thank you. Listen to 3 Martini Lunch. The editors read them in the Washington Post and National Review, The Morning Jolt. Stay with me. Continetti is next on The Hugh Hewitt Show.